Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to get started in a minute or two as folks filter in. You are in the right place. Hold tight. We'll get started in about a minute. Thanks so much for being here. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll get started in a few seconds. Thanks for being here. You're in the right place. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here at the Communities Focus Area webinar at the McConnell Foundation. My name is Lily. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a program officer here at the McConnell Foundation. I'm calling from the unceded territories of the Hmuthuim, Skohomish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations in what is colonially known as Vancouver. In a minute, we'll also share a territory acknowledgement for the McConnell Foundation. Thank you so much for attending. Before we get too far, we want to make sure that everyone has access to the tools that they need to support their engagement. So, a few technical tips. To turn on the auto captions, you can navigate down to the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen and turn it on. You can see it here. We do have ASL interpretation today. Please click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. It looks like this. Then you select ASL interpretation, and the window with the interpreters will pop up, which you can move easily around the screen for viewing. Finally, you may notice that you're muted and your video is off. This is because we are recording the webinar to post on our website, and we don't want to violate anyone's privacy. The chat is open, especially if you need tech support. You can message our communications team. The communications team will monitor the chat, but the presenters will not respond to the chat until the Q&A portion. If you have a question, please click the Q&A button at the bottom to open up the box. Oh, sorry. You can, you can also upvote questions that are similar to yours. Oh, my screen sharing is paused. Sorry, everybody. I am going to make sure that it is working. Thank you, team. Okay, great. Can folks see the slides now? Great, thank you. Sorry, folks. So back to our technical tips. You can use the Q&A box at the bottom to ask questions throughout the session. You can also upvote questions that are similar to yours. If you can't find the Q&A box, please use the chat to ask your questions of the hosts. Some questions will be answered in writing during the session, but we'll go over all the questions at the end live. Also, both the webinar and the slides will be sent to you after the session, along with the written responses to any questions asked. We'll now pause for a moment in case you have any tech issues, like, for example, if you are not seeing the slides because I didn't share them. Please use the chat or the Q&A box to ask for support. We'll just pause for a few seconds here. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to get in touch with someone to ask for support. Can do that at any point during the session. Now, I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Frances to introduce herself and share the land acknowledgement for the McConnell Foundation. Over to you, Frances.
Hi, everyone. My name is Frances, and I work within the communities team at the foundation. I'm currently located on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory by the Kichi-Zibi, where I've been fortunate enough to live, work, and play. But I would also like to take the time to acknowledge where our office is based. The McConnell Foundation office sits on ancestral and unceded Indigenous territory, a place known as Chochake in Kanigeha and Muniyang in Anishinaabe-Mowen. We recognize that the Kanigehaga Nation are stewards of the lands and waters of this territory, which has been a place where meetings and exchanges among nations have occurred. Alongside the Foundation's land acknowledgement, you will see an image created by Iroma Awashish, which was created for the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation series in 2022. In the image, you can see the forest, which illustrates the land that Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples share, the eagle, which is a sacred symbol in many Indigenous cultures, and a sweat lodge, which represents a mother's womb, a space where one can renew, heal from collective pain, and be reborn. And now back to Lily to introduce the McConnell Foundation.
Thank you, Francis. So, the McConnell Foundation is a private Canadian family foundation that works towards a resilient, inclusive, and sustainable society that can successfully address its complex challenges. We do this through funding and investment partnerships, strengthening capabilities, convening, and collaborating with the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. The McConnell Foundation was founded by J.W. McConnell in 1937 and is currently based in Montreal, which leads to our long history in partnership with the City of Montreal. Important to note is that we are a family foundation. At the foundation, we make our funding decisions for granting based on our focused areas and their respective strategies. So our focus areas are reconciliation for Indigenous communities with a focus on economic reconciliation, working with the National Indigenous Economic Strategy, or NIES. We also have climate, which is for environmental projects with a strategy on carbon emission reduction. We have communities, which is this focus area, focused on supporting equity-denied communities to build power and address systemic issues, which we are sharing the revised strategy for today. We also have a separate funding stream for specific Montreal-based projects to recognize our longstanding history with the City of Montreal. Now over to Naulo to share more about the community's focus area and our revised strategy.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you so much. So hi, everyone. My name is Naulo Charles. I'm the director of the community's focus area. I'm calling from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, a place that is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, otherwise known as Toronto. This is a city that is also home to many who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. As we recognize the land where we are as Indigenous land, I also wanted to pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent that history has brought to these lands. And I've borrowed the language that we just shared from the City of Toronto to do so. So a few years back, we were all in the middle of the global pandemic. In the midst of these unique times where most people feared for their lives, the murder of George Floyd happened, sending shockwaves through society. It was not the first event of that type to be captured on camera, but I'm not sure why people reacted differently to that one. But since that time, we've also been on a journey, looking in depth at how we were working and who we're working with. This has led us to this new strategy refinement. So we will now have an official focus on funding projects tackling systemic issues experienced by equity-denied groups, with a focus on racialized communities and intersectionality. So what does that mean? Next slide, please. So this means that projects that are trying to tackle systemic issues experienced by these groups centering the leadership of the groups, have a significant higher probability of being funded than projects that don't. Intersectionality will allow us to continue supporting a variety of equity-denied groups, including people with disabilities, LGBTQ communities, immigrants, and refugees, women, youth, seniors, to only cite a few. So we didn't come to this decision lightly. When we consulted community groups on the ground, we learned that racialized groups tended to be the most impacted by systemic issues and the least supported by philanthropy. In order to address this historical harm, the community's focus area will adopt a specific focus on racialized groups and intersectionality. Our focus area will intentionally seek out partnerships with groups working on systemic issues affecting people at the intersection of several marginalized identities, therefore centering intersectionality in our granting. This is an important milestone for us, but we're also hoping that it will be a catalyst of change for our communities and for the sector. These changes are actually added to a strategy that was already strongly focused on equity and also on systems change. Our focus on systems change already translated a will to use our resources to impact the most people possible. Now, by investing resources and increasing protections for the most marginalized in society, we believe that we'll end up creating conditions that will be better for everyone. So with this announcement also comes several calls to action to the community groups interested in partnering with us, to the sector, to society as a whole, but also to us, to ourselves. To remind everyone, our strategy started by focusing on fostering systems change by relying on two pillars: collective action and policy change. There are many definitions of systems change out there, like the Water of Systems Change from FSG, that are excellent definitions. But I think we can all agree on the fact that systems change is about creating changes that will address or resolve systemic issues. And systemic issues could be described as deeply rooted challenges that lie beyond the control of individuals and that are shaped by the interplay of historical, institutional, and collective forces. The strategy that we had was already focused on funding changes to policies to address systemic issues, and the understanding was already in terms of changes to laws. Our strategy was also relying on funding collective action. One way that we often explain collective action is by saying that if you want it to be aligned, groups would have to work on the problem that cannot be resolved by isolated organizations. Only collaboration across communities, organizations, and sectors can solve these systemic issues. Next slide, please. So our refined strategy includes the continuing two pillars: collaboration and collective action, and policy change, with some small updates to these existing pillars. Since we're in a transition phase between the previous and the refined strategy, we'll take that into consideration in the assessment of already submitted applications, for those of you who have already submitted applications. But in terms of the changes that we've made, we're also pleased to announce that we introduced a third pillar that we call the regeneration pillar, that we'll be sharing more details about after reviewing the first two pillars. But first, I want to explain the vision, the updates, and the calls to action behind some of these choices. If we can move to the next slide. So one of the first call to action, if we can call it that way, is about collective action. We think that we cannot afford to keep working in isolated fashion. The world is becoming more divided, and so we can't afford to fall for these divisions. We cannot afford to be divided by nationalities, by race, by gender, or by religion or political affiliations. So if we are really to solve most of the very complex social issues of our modern time, we have to work collectively across silos, because many of the issues we're trying to solve are so complex that they cannot just be resolved by isolated actors. So collective action is and remains a key pillar of our strategy, which leads me to call to action number 2. If you can move to the next slide. So we also need to promote progressive policies for equity denied communities. Whether it is at the federal, provincial, or municipal level, there's a policy that you can change or promote to increase protections for your community. One of the things we hear a lot from communities is that they don't have the means to engage in policy work. So this is where a funding strategy like ours can help you meet your goals. No matter who we talk to in our consultations process, policy change was really identified as a key change lever to prioritize. And this is work we want to fund. However, for us, policy change doesn't have to be about proposing new laws. It can also be about using existing laws to protect communities. Take, for instance, one of the partners that we have, DTMF, the Association for the Rights of the Household and Farm Workers, who are running a constitutional law challenge on open run permits in Canada. This is an organization that is aligned to an entire movement for migrants' rights. So we funded them under policy change, but they're also aligned with collective action, which is often the case. So you don't have to choose only one of our strategy pillars. They often come together. It's also important to note that one of the refinement we made is that we'll also fund institutional change in policy change. But only when it's brought by community groups. So just to clarify what that means, we realize that there's some organizations that are so powerful that when they make changes to their policies, it can have impacts on equity denied communities, the same way that a law is going to have an impact. So so the refinement is that we will be funding work that is about changing the policies of these organizations, but we will not be funding the organizations themselves. So if they're trying to start a DNI policy, for instance, we're not going to be funding the organization themselves, but we will be funding the groups that are trying to influence them. So our third and final call to action is going to be about history. We need to develop a deeper understanding of history and address historical harm. To do that, our team has introduced a completely new pillar to our strategy, a third pillar that we call the regeneration pillar. Although the concept of regeneration is a biomimicry concept, which means that it's an idea that emulates existing laws and processes in nature, something indigenous groups around the world have done for thousands of years. Our understanding of regeneration is mostly in terms of the healing and restoring of healthy social and human systems. Regeneration often involves a historical disruption that really amputated a community of a healthy function. The regeneration process takes root in history to heal and reimagine a new future. With regeneration, we'll be able to support local innovations by impacted communities, but we'll also be able to support long-term healing agendas. Maybe an example of this type of work could be seen in a partnership we started with Acoma Holdings in Nova Scotia. Many African Nova Scotian communities came from slavery in America, and they were offered land when they fought with the British Empire. Few of them actually received or kept that land. Acoma Holdings is one of the largest Black land owner in North America. With 320 acres of land, they're trying to promote cooperative economics and build economic power for their community. And this is happening in the same site that used to be home to what was called the orphanage for colored children, a site of trauma for many people in the community. So this work could be seen as regeneration work if Acoma Holdings is able to use that place that used to be a place of harm for some people and change it into a place of healing for the community. There are many other groups in the country that are doing this type of historical healing work. And since this is a new refined strategy, we can't really provide examples of partnerships yet. So we're looking forward to working with new partners in that area. Now, by officially having a strategic pillar dedicated to historic healing, we believe that our strategy now perfectly aligns with the different ways that systemic issues are manufactured. One, through patterns and decisions at the collective level, which we address with the collective action pillar. Two, through decisions by what we can call powerful institutions like governments, through the policy change pillar. And third, through patterns in history, which we address with the regeneration pillar. I think it's important to note that this perspective on regeneration, of being rooted in history while looking forward to the future, is perfectly represented by the Sankofa bird that you can see here in the slide. It's one of the Akan Adinkra symbols that represent the practices of looking back to move forward. Adinkra symbols are ancient symbols of the Akan people of West Africa. And in this symbol, the bird looks back, but its body is facing forward. And that's the positioning we want to invest in regeneration. Now I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues who will share their own thoughts on how this new pillar manifests for themselves, and they will share more details.
Thanks, Nalo. So yeah, our team all came to this new pillar with different perspectives. For me, through our research process and my experiences at the foundation and before, some communities are not yet ready to do the kind of public policy or collective action work that we are looking to support and need more time to rebuild their own community first. So in the previous iteration of our strategy, we were not able to support some really exciting and necessary projects that were in the beginning stages of building community and collective power. With the regeneration pillar, we hope to be able to support equity denied, racialized, and intersectional community groups to grow their communities to the point of taking on public policy or collective action projects to affect change outside their own community. This work could look like community healing, history excavation, collective future visioning, and more. Over to you, Francis.
Me? First, we have to recognize that historically, many groups within our communities have been harmed, such as through colonization. This created continual inequity that we want to repair today. For me, that requires being able to partner with projects that bring healing to trauma to regenerate a more equitable future. Healing so that there can be new growth. So to sum up, we will continue to support collective action and policy change, but now have a new pillar of regeneration. We will also prioritize funding equity denied and intersectional groups across all our pillars. And now Lily will share what we do not fund.
Did we lose Lily?
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself. Sorry, friends. Okay. Just as important as what we do fund is what we do not fund. These decisions were made strategically as the McConnell Foundation to be specific in our approach to supporting systemic change and are in line with legal requirements for foundations. Although the text is on the slide, I'm also going to read it out for accessibility and clarity. So, we do not consider requests that are part of a general fundraising campaign or to reduce deficits. We don't consider requests for university or hospital endowments or for annual operating funds or other recurring costs unless they're directly linked to one of our focus areas and the success of the proposed project. We don't consider requests involving partisan political activities or strictly religious purposes or activities. We also don't consider requests for purely academic research or basic research. As we are a Canadian foundation, we don't consider requests for organizations or projects outside of Canada or for international development initiatives. We also don't consider requests for projects advancing nature-based solutions such as reforestation, tree planting, nature conservation, or biodiversity preservation. Finally, we don't consider requests for organizational emergency needs as we have quite long funding timelines. We also don't consider requests from for-profit organizations except in very rare and specific circumstances or for private schools. We also don't consider requests for ongoing delivery of frontline services such as food banks or shelters. I will remind everyone at this moment that these slides will be sent out in case you are typing quickly. Finally, we do not consider requests in which the primary activity is the production of a podcast, video, or publication, a conference, workshop, or seminar, or the main focus is training, scholarships, or subsidies, although any of those three things could be part of a larger scale project or program. At this point, this might lead you to further questions about our programs and opportunities. This is a great time to add any questions to the Q&A box, which we'll answer as best as we can throughout the presentation. But again, all questions will be responded to at the end of the session in the Q&A. Please note that we will not answer specific questions about your unique project or assess eligibility on this call. We will share more ways to connect one-on-one at the end of the session. We're now going to go look at some other considerations we have while reviewing applications in addition to these three strategies and what we don't fund. So when we receive an application, it's reviewed by the staff team here and some other folks on our team to determine alignment with our strategy. These five key considerations are a big part of how we review applications. We're sharing these so you can have a broader sense of our goals and what kinds of partnerships we're hoping to build. So the first key consideration is nothing about us without us, which you've probably heard of before. And from my experience, I've learned from Indigenous communities and disability justice communities. So we're looking to fund projects that are led by and for the communities impacted by a social issue, by a systemic issue. We know that those most impacted by an issue often have the best ideas for how to address that issue, and we want to fund those communities on the ground to do the work needed. Nothing about us without us helps us identify organizations and projects that are deeply embedded with and grown from the equity denied community that is impacted by a social issue. While we are the second one is while we're trying to move away from old ways of working, we want to support projects that are doing the same and are challenging the status quo, as well as the harmful systems and assumptions that society has normalized. We know that our current ways of working are insufficient to address the big problems of our time, and we look forward to partnering with organizations and communities that are learning from history and dreaming of the future in new and exciting ways. An example of this kind of thinking is an organization like Can't Buy My Silence, who we recently partnered with. They are working to eliminate the use of non-disclosure agreements in employment contracts to prevent the silencing of survivors of sexual violence, among other misuses of non-disclosure agreements in employment settings. They are led by survivors and are working to radically shift the employment landscape to empower survivors to speak up about their experiences and seek justice and healing. Francis, over to you to discuss underfunded groups.
So thirdly, we're hoping to allocate resources to underfunded groups, recognizing that philanthropic dollars have been unevenly distributed, and many community organizations, especially grassroots organizations, are underfunded. Well-resourced groups are often continue to attract more funding, which then puts other groups that challenge conventional thinking to the margins. We're hoping to be intentional with supporting groups that may often be overlooked. And then we're also hoping to support projects that have specific and clear goals. While we recognize that sometimes projects change and evolve, clarity of goals and outcomes help us understand and learn a project's alignment with our strategies. It is less about making it clear to match our language, but rather how can we as a team understand the project. As an example on specificity, we're looking less for the sole generalization of eradicating poverty, but rather having specific targets, such as by moving specific policies or levers of change, how do we hope to lower poverty rates? Nalo will now share a little bit more about additionality.
Thank you so much, Frances. Okay, so although all of these criteria show how an organization can align to our strategy, it's also possible that your project aligns with all of this and we still won't fund it. This is because there are many other factors that we need to take into consideration, and we're trying to be transparent. But at the end of the day, decisions will be influenced by many factors. So I want to give you an example of other factors. And so the example we want to give today is the concept of an additionality. So we're trying to build a portfolio of partnerships, as we mentioned before. And we have to support a variety of equity denied groups on multiple different issues. However, our intention is to also have each investment that we make complement the existing portfolio. So this means that we're always looking for complementary work that adds to our existing investments. And there are spaces where we know we'll be making multiple investments, but every new investment must be adding an added value to the existing portfolio. So that's another dimension of the decision making that cannot really be predicted, but that is also part of some of the things we have to think about. So if you can move us to the next slide. So the big question, are we walking the talk? So our funding disbursement to racialized groups and groups with intersectionality is still small. We're at the beginning of a journey and we're trying to do better. We're very proud of all our partnerships. But I wanted to highlight today some examples of partnerships we've started in recent times that are key partnerships representing some of the work we're trying to support. If you look on the screen, you can see Disability Without Poverty. This is an organization working with people with disabilities, often having a focus on racialized people, really strong work. We talked about Acoma Holdings before, the Afro-Nova Scotian communities in Nova Scotia, the Enchanté Network, doing a lot of work for LGBTQ communities. We have the Refugee Center working on newcomers, and also organizations like the Canadian Network of Community Land Trusts that are working with diverse communities, trying to advance mutual aid solutions that are kind of building power in communities. So this touches a good number of equity denied groups that we want to support, but one key group that we need to find a way to support more in communities is Indigenous communities. The reconciliation focus area on McConnell is specific to economic reconciliation. So community members told us that we need to continue to include Indigenous communities in the communities focus area as well, because all their needs are not met through our focus on economic reconciliation. Finally, what is really important to reiterate is the hypothesis behind some of our choices. We believe that by focusing on addressing the root causes of systemic issues experienced by the most marginalized in society, by investing in bold projects that promote collective action, policy change, and regeneration on issues that particularly affect these underserved communities, by empowering groups that are usually disregarded by philanthropy, we do believe that we'll be able to maximize the impact of our granting and help everyone, even beyond the target populations that we'll invest in. Because when we help the most underserved in society, we end up helping everyone. Unfortunately, it also means that we may also not fund some really impactful work that really makes important changes in communities, but that does not align with the way our strategy has been framed. First, we need to indicate that there are many variables, as we mentioned before, that affect how we make our decisions. Sometimes we'll start partnerships with groups that do not perfectly align when it makes sense as well. So while we want to be clear on our criteria, there are many other factors of influence on decision making. And we also want to have some flexibility on the criteria when it makes sense to do so. More importantly, it's important for groups to understand that we can be in partnership with you, not just as funders. There are other roles that are delineated on our website that we hope to be able to play in society. And these roles are not just applied to the community's focus area, they're applied to the entire foundation. So if we can move to the next slide. So after all these details that we shared with you, if you think that your organization is a great fit for a partnership with us in this focus area, how do you start applying? First, we receive applications every day. We analyze applications every day. You can send them online. We have a two-stage process, one expression of interest, and then if your project aligns, we'll send you an invitation for a full detailed application, which would include a due diligence process in collaboration with you. More details are available in the partnership and funding guide if you want to learn more about this process. Now over to Frances for more details.
In addition to today's webinar, we would also like to share with you some other resources. The Funding and Partnership Guide would go into further details about how we make funding decisions and expand on what was shared today. It's also where you'll find more details into other focus areas, funding priorities. You can also find a sample application that will also provide a preview into application questions and budget template. As our strategy refinement has just happened, we will be adjusting the questions as reflected on the Funding and Partnerships Guide alongside the sample application in the new year. If you're unsure about whether we would be a good partner for your project, feel free to reach out to speak to the team members during a virtual office hour. Finally, our funding database lists different projects that we funded, with more recent grants being projects that have higher alignment with our current strategy. Now, onto the exciting Q&A.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. The formal part of us speaking at you is done. We'll now move into our Q&A. If you haven't had a chance yet, we invite you now to add questions into the Q&A box or into the chat if you can't find the Q&A box. I'll be reading them out and Nalo will provide an answer, potentially Francis or I as well. So everyone will just pause for a little bit for me to move my windows around and give you a chance to add your questions.
So I see a question here in the Q&A. Can you tell us more? Can you tell us a bit more about the icon you chose for the regeneration pillar? So I think we addressed that a little bit. It's called the Sankofa bird, and you can look it up by looking up Adinkras, and these are typical ancient symbols that all come with meaning and philosophies. So we thought it was a good representation of the pillar.
Great. Thank you. We have a question. Is regeneration mainly focused on, oh my goodness, sorry. Mainly focused on Indigenous rights and history is the question.
So no, it's not. Regeneration is not going to be just focused on Indigenous. As one of my colleagues mentioned before, many of the communities we're trying to support have a history of being impacted by colonial processes and all type of historical harm. And so any community that is dealing with that could actually be supported under regeneration.
Great. Thank you, Nello. Our next question is, how do you feel about supporting arts activities, theater or live performance, that engage intersectionality and are more directed at driving community action without directly engaging in political action, for example, lobbying?
Thank you so much. That's a very good question. Maybe Lily, when you ask the question, if you can say who's asking it so that I can recognize them.
Yeah, of course. It is, my apologies if I mispronounce this, Suchitha.
Okay,
I'm so
Suchita,
sorry.
thank you so much for the question. That's something we think a lot about because we know that Arts for Social Change is a very important movement. We have personal interest in that. What I would say is that our entry point is always systems change. So if the work that you're doing is creating systems change, whether it is true, the way you do it, it's not going to be what we will be using to discriminate your project. So the challenge is that how, maybe there's some challenges and sometimes how we can use arts to create systems change, but we're open to learning and we're open to hearing and seeing the applications that would be coming. That's actually one of the opportunities that we're creating in regeneration. It's being open to see what's out there.
Great. Thanks, Nello. We have a question from Rishenda. Does McConnell still fund university-based units that are not for endowment or recurring cost, but rather for a specific project?
Thank you so much for this question. So in terms of universities, our policy is that we fund work that is led by community where universities are a key partner. but we're not really going to be funding universities directly for work that they're doing. And I understand universities sometimes play a key role, but maybe some background to that is there's so much data that philanthropy became aware of the fact that universities and hospitals have really been allocated most of the philanthropic resources for a very long time. So in our effort to be there and show up for equity denied communities, with limited resources, so we had to also make decisions to make sure that we had enough resources for these communities that haven't been supported.
Great. We have a question from Robert. When will the website and template applications be updated on the website to reflect the changes you outlined?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. So we already have an update on the website when it comes to the description of what we fund. In terms of the questions, we're targeting the new year. Well, there's a lot of changes, so we're targeting the new year. We'll try and make these changes as soon as possible. But like I mentioned before, we will not be penalizing anyone who's applying at a time when our process is not fully completed.
Great. And is supporting capacity strengthening initiatives for the charitable and nonprofit sector still one of your funding priorities?
So the capacity strengthening actually is a priority for the foundation, and we do have maybe not a focus area, but we do have a program that is dedicated to that. It's however outside of the community's focus area, so it's also outside of the scope of this conversation today. But I'm sure that if you wanted to learn more, you could reach out to us and speak to our colleagues in charge of that program.
Great, thanks. A question from Athavarn. Can you clarify that we do not consider requests for international development initiatives? So, for example, can projects have connections to the UN system at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's the challenge is not that I don't think we will penalize you if you have connections to international work, but the work that we will fund is for the work that's happening in Canada, and that's even I would say it's just what we got our charity status for.
Great. A question from Kahir. Is travel eligible within Canada to bring equity denied people together for in-person meetings as part of a coalition?
So what I would say, the way I would answer this question is that, again, our entry point is systems change. So if you have a project that is about travel, and that it's leading to systems change, it could be a part of it. But I don't see how it will be the entire design of the project.
Great, thank you. A question from Jackie. If a workshop is one aspect of a larger project, can funding from McConnell still go towards the workshops, or will they need to be funded by other external funding?
Yes, no, it can be. Thank you for the question. It can be part of the project. I think Lydie did mention that we, if workshops are just part of what you're doing, it's okay. We often fund community engagement. Sometimes the work that we're funding, partners have to engage with communities. So workshops can be part of that.
Great. I have a great question from Kate that's been boosted by Liz. The organizations that include the Nothing About Us Without Us sometimes don't have the capacity to write the proposals. Do these organizations need to be the leads, or can they be a partner or offer a letter of support? And Liz's kind of clarification is, an underfunded disability-led organization and not able to afford the accommodations to support the work.
It's a very good question. I'm wondering if it's coming from Liz in Nova Scotia. I know that there's a lot of work happening there to support, less resourced equity denied communities to be able to engage in the philanthropic process. So what I would say is this is more connected to the way we have to adapt our own practices to be more to have accommodations for those organizations and those communities that probably need more support, and that's part of the journey that we talked about. So I can tell you that we have an existing practice right now, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to build adaptations to our processes eventually.
Great. We have a few questions on the theme of nothing about us without us, so I'll just kind of ask those together.
Okay.
The first question is kind of broad from Maria. Can you please explain again the nothing about us without us consideration? And there's a kind of clarifying question from Liz, which is, this is a fantastic strategy. You mentioned nothing about us without us. Is there a criterion, for example, like 70% of leadership or B3 organizations to assess that? So as a Black and disability-led organization, we found the more prominent organizations are adding intersectionality or community partners, but those groups are still not leading or decision makers. So broad, nothing about us without us question for you.
Yeah, so the nothing about us without us is I guess we have to understand why we wanted to focus on that. It's really a strategy to say we want to be closer to the communities that have the highest needs, and we also want to be supported the actors and the organizations that better understand their issues. All right, so that we can invest in the right solutions. So how we operationalize that is something we're working on. But what I would say is what we know now is that the idea for us is to support the leadership of impacted communities. So what we're trying to stay away from is funding organizations that are led by people who are outside of these communities and who don't actually um, come from a place of full understanding of what's going on, but who tend to receive the philanthropic resources. That's part of some of the patterns we have in the sector. So this is more for us a desire to shift a little bit practices and make sure that we're closer to communities. Yeah, and our plan is to also, we have some next steps in terms of after the webinar in terms of clarifying the strategy and hoping that these next steps will be able to answer these questions as well.
Great, thank you. Kind of related to that, we have a question from Kate. Can you provide some definitions of underfunded groups? So, for example, could this include small nonprofit organizations?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. It's a very important question. Yes, small nonprofit organizations, we don't just fund charities, we would also fund what we call non-qualified donees, so nonprofits. And yes, we can be funding small nonprofit organizations. What I need to clarify is that, as I said, our strategy is the entry point of our strategy is systems change. And one of the tensions we've always had since the beginning is how we can fund systems change for communities that probably don't have organizations that have been receiving a lot of power historically, and so don't belong to these circles of power. And so that's a tension that we're trying to manage and we're trying to address. And this criteria of trying to support underfunded organizations is also trying to make sure that we're showing up for groups that have great ideas, great practices, great solutions, but are not actually attracting philanthropic funding. We also have another criteria that we mentioned that was challenging the status quo. And we know that often the groups that challenge the status quo are likely to not be 100% aligned with circles of power. So maybe this criteria is a little bit of an opportunity for us to support some of these groups.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go to a really juicy question from Stephanie that I think is a bit related to what you were talking about at the end there. So it has been demonstrated that orgs and individuals that focus on systems change can fall out of favor with government funders on which many organizations rely. Indeed, government has been instrumental in de-radicalizing community-based organizations. Given McConnell's want to drive systems change, what are some of the risk management strategies that you suggest for orgs that challenge the status quo? Even naming colonization and land theft can run an org and individual afoul of government funders, putting them at odds with the McConnell goals.
Yes, thank you for this question. I mean, this comment, that's an amazing, and that's a reality. We know it's a reality. I don't know if I don't know if I'm qualified to give you advice on that. What I would say is that we want to be a partner in that. So we want to be a partner in building resilience for organizations that are um, dealing with that. In the current context where we are, we know that there's probably going to be some shifting trends in society that may also lead to more organizations having challenges like that. So, so all of this is part of the complexity of trying to support equity denied communities. But I think the fact that our strategy is as that clear on this commitment is an expression of the fact that we want to be a partner with you in being able to challenge the status quo.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Jeanette. What's your position concerning international development projects in underdeveloped countries? For example, projects on women's leadership and rights, climate change adaptation, etc.
Well, I mean, my position, our position, these are important projects. There's global needs that are really important. The challenge, however, is that we're not framed for that. We're not framed for international support. We're funding locally. That's our mandate. So unfortunately, we can't really support international work.
Great, thanks. We have a question from Aaron. Can we organize with other groups to submit multiple proposals to further develop a diverse and interconnected portfolio of projects?
Yes, so yeah, I would say yes. Actually, we try to incentivize groups coming together and having collective action solutions. So then yes. Now I don't know about the multiple proposals. If you're sending more than one proposal that we have to evaluate, we're not likely to make more than one grant. So so I don't know if I would recommend that. But we also have part of our process is the office hours, where you can meet with some of our team members and kind of check in and present your projects, and we can always give advice during this time.
Great. We have a few questions kind of about the funding portal and the application question process. So from Christy and Emma, will the funding applications be updated in the portal in 2025? And will we still be accepting funding applications aligned with the newly released priorities, but in response to the current questions on the portal through the end of 2024? So yeah,
Yeah,
current.
yeah. So now with this webinar, we're announcing the changes and we're hoping, so now we're in a transition. The questions haven't been changed yet because we want to make sure we put all of the thinking necessary in doing that. But the hope is that by 2025, as soon as 2025 starts, that this entire process will be completed. So and if any organization finds themselves in a gap during that transition, we will be assessing with that understanding. And we've done that before as well. When we refined our strategy last time, we were also treating our applications differently based on when they were coming in the process.
Great. We've got another straightforward question about the application process from Rowan. What is the application timeline like? How long does it take an application to go from yes if you're successful or no if you're not?
It's a good question. Thank you so much for this question. Okay, so like I said, we receive applications every day, and we have a two-stage process. We try to for the first stage, when you send an expression of interest, we try to respond as fast as we can, right? But based on the demand, based on many other of the priorities we have, many other of the work we need to invest in, that sometimes it's not gonna be processed right away. So, maybe 3 weeks for your expression of interest to be to be analyzed. Maybe it's going to be right away. It depends really on when you apply. And then what is really important to note is when we send you the stage 2 invite, then it's going to be up to you to prepare that stage 2 proposal. Then you're going to have your own time for the preparation of that. And then once you send that, because we're going to have a due diligence process where we try to speak with some of your community organizations you work with, some of your previous funders, to better understand the project. So that process can take some time, maybe a few weeks. But depending on the complexity of the and the nature of the project, it could take even more time than that. And so I would say from the time you send an application to the time we announce you, we give it, if you receive the grant, it could take maybe 2-3 months, right? And so but it depends. It depends on the nature of the project, and it depends on so many factors.
Great, thanks. We have another question kind of about this transition period from Elizabeth. If we already submitted our first stage application prior to the release of these new priorities, will we still be able to tailor a second stage application to these priorities?
Yes. Yes, thank you so much. That's a very good question. If you want to, you will. So if you think that the refined strategy provides new opportunity for you, yeah, you will. I also want to take a minute to because I saw a comment here to remind everyone just in case we haven't mentioned that the firm we worked with to complete our community consultation is agency, and we have also run some other consultation process before. But agency was really helpful in helping us engage with community members and providing advice. So we're really grateful for that support.
Great. We have a question from Natasha. Thank you for the presentation. Can you share more information about how climate action fits within your priorities?
That's a very good question. So as we mentioned before, we do have the reconciliation focus area for indigenous communities, and we have the climate focus area for environmental projects and climate action. So normally that's the way this is organized. It doesn't mean that in the communities focus area we will not fund work that is connected to the theme. What matters is, are you promoting systems change? Are you addressing work for equity denied communities? Sometimes we would even work in collaboration with the other focus areas. So we will have partnerships where we would be funding from a perspective of communities because we like something in communities. And then the other side will be climate that will be funding on their side. Or it's going to be reconciliation that's going to be funding. So we work together. So we can't really say the climate work cannot be funded under communities, but at the end of the day, the communities focus area tends to be more about that social justice piece. And so if your work is at the intersection of the two, then why not?
Great. We have a question from Karen. Are you saying that if our work aligns with one of the types of organizations, for example, ACOMA, Enchanté, or Canadian Network of Community Land Trusts, in the regeneration slide, that this is advantageous?
Well, so I won't say it like that. I think we wanted to give you some examples of partnerships that we think are strong. It doesn't mean that we're asking you to send us proposal to do exactly the same work, and reminding you what I was trying to say about reminding you that what I said about additionality. So we're always trying to find strategies that are complementary to address some of the systemic issues, and the systems tend to be connected. So it's important for us to also move our attention in many spaces in society, right? And sometimes we also know that there are spaces where we have to be there and make multiple investments. But what I would say is that I wouldn't recommend that you look at those as something that you have to align with. The systems change reflection is the foundation to what we're trying to do, and then how that supports equity denied communities, how you support the leadership of equity denied communities. That is really what's going to make your proposal stronger. And we're looking for new ideas and new ways to learn about these issues.
Great, thank you. We have a question that was submitted in French, so I'm just going to translate it into English. A reminder for folks on the call, we do have a French language webinar tomorrow morning as well. So can a current partner for Project X apply for Project Y, even if the first project has not yet been completed?
Oh, that's a good question. So you mean if you're already a partner on the project, can you send your own proposal? I don't think we have any rule about that. It really depends if you're only, it depends on if you're a partner that receives budget funding.
Their
If
current funded partner.
Yeah, so if you're funded in a current project, then we would have to analyze that whether that would be a renewal or yes or no. But I would say these are great questions for office hours, because then we can kind of look at the particular situation. I would say this is more maybe a case by case kind of question.
Great. We have a question that is about office hours. Thanks for the information. I noticed that there are no available dates for booking a virtual call at the moment. Could you please let me know when dates will be available for booking?
That is a great question. Thank you so much, because you give us an opportunity to let everyone know we may actually have more dates open. Our colleague Frances, for instance, she just came from maternity leave, so she wasn't taking calls. Now, after this webinar, we're going to be opening up the office hours to all team members, so we're going to have more capacity to take calls. So I would recommend that you go back and check for available dates.
Great. We have a question about multi-year versus single-year funding from Suchitha. Are you interested in multi-year funding rather than single-year funding?
Yes, we tend to be interested in multi-year funding. We tend to want to actually support over multiple years, 2-3 years sometimes. But again, it depends on the nature of the project. We also have some other tools that we can use for single year funding. We have the program development grants. We have the opportunity grants. That are all perfectly explained in our partnership and funding guide that you can find on the website. These are grants that we can provide for just 1 year and to a maximum of $50,000, but there's also a limited envelope for this type of grants. But typically we tend to be more of a multi-year funder.
Great, thank you. There is a question from Grace that I'm going to reframe a bit so that it's a bit more broad. So an example given is an organization that is working in collaboration to address homelessness for racialized youth. And it sounds like there's already a kind of collaborative effort underway. The question is there funding potentially, or could a project of that nature potentially be aligned with the strategy?
So we're talking about collective action work for homeless youth.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like we mentioned before, we can't really be making an assessment on a particular project idea. But I think what I would recommend, maybe going on the web page that we have, where we explain all the different criteria that we have, and maybe evaluating yourself if the project that you have aligns well with these different things. And also don't hesitate to take an office hours and talk to us about the project.
Great. We have a question from Thawana. How do you judge the project outcomes? Are there outcomes important to be highlighted in the application? And can the project I'm developing have a final policy paper to be presented to decision makers, for example?
Wow, that's a great question. How do we judge projects outcomes? Well, we all we can use to judge your track record, if we can use that term, is the proposal that you sent us. Sometimes when we don't fully understand, we would try to have a call with you to better understand. But how do we judge? What I would say is we are a learning organization. Personally, I think every time that I receive an application that makes me learn something, I do believe that there's something interesting there. And so, but we're not really we're not, I don't think it's our role to be judging projects outcomes. What we do is that we assess alignment between projects and our strategy. And that's really what we do. And one of the ways that we try to get a sense of track record is through our due diligence process, and speaking with people who are more experts of the actual project. So we're not positioning ourselves as the expert of a particular project. We're learners.
Great. We have a question about the phrase equity denied communities, and specifically wondering how future generations would fit within that understanding of an equity denied community, given the enormous risks, costs, and harms, climate and otherwise, that they're posed to inherit. For this organization, this is at the core of the kind of long-term thinking. We need to create fairer systems.
Thank you for this question. It's actually a very good question, because I'm wondering if your organization is the one who sent us a proposal that made us reflect on that. Our future generations equity denied communities. Yes, maybe. Yeah, I think we could present that this way. The challenge is that um, it's a similar challenge to when we receive applications on general populations work that is really helping everyone, because of the target and our expectation and our desire to have clarity and specificity. It aligns better to a very targeted approach. So future generations I really think we can agree on the fact that yes, they are probably an equity denied community because of the things that are happening in the world right now. But also who specifically are you helping, and how can we really assess potential impact? So that's a key question. But that's also probably an example where if we receive a strong proposal that has that framing, then that would be an opportunity for us where we're being flexible on our criteria, right?
Great. We have a question from Logan. Is there any organization that would be too small or too underfunded to be considered for funding?
So I would say no. And because that would be going contrary to what we're trying to do. However, it's possible that you don't have enough capacity, that you're too early stage, and these things it's more in connection to the problem you're trying to solve, right? And so it's not really that we'll be penalizing you because your organization is too small. It's just that maybe your organization is too small to tackle the challenge that you're proposing. And so and maybe maybe the scope of it is too large. So that would be the point. But because I think we have to be aware, there's a lot of ambition behind the things we're trying to do. We're trying to, when we talk about systems change, so it means that although we want to support underfunded groups, we also want to support groups that have capacity to make a change.
Maybe if I can add to that, I think
Yeah.
that's a great opportunity for a collaborative action project.
Yeah.
Potentially, there's other small organizations that you could partner with, and that could make a really strong impact, and then demonstrate this kind of group capacity or collaborative approach.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Lily. Yeah.
We have a question from Jordan, which is a bit more of a definition of what community-led means.
Well, thank you for the question. That's very very important question. Community-led will be more based on which community you're helping, right? So So when we talk about impacted communities, is the work led by the communities? It doesn't mean, it means they're not just being invited in the work, they're also part of the design of the solutions that you're trying to create. That's what so the leadership includes people from impacted communities. That would be the community-led definition in my opinion.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Awasis. Are scholarships eligible expenses when in partnership with specific university programs to recruit students from equity denied groups to perform specific research related tasks for the project? This might be too specific for us to answer, but
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that it's probably too specific to answer, but also, I would say we've been trying to clarify is that it's not just about the components of your project, it's more about the framing of the project and whether that's a systems change project. And in that project, if you have scholarships as being one of your strategies, okay, but we're not likely to fund just scholarships, right? So we're funding the systems change.
great. We have a question from Ty. Can you clarify partnership? So, for example, if a nonprofit, non-Indigenous organization wants to support an Indigenous-led community project, including helping with the application process, how is this best demonstrated?
So when we use the term partnership, we often use it in terms of the relationship that we have with the organizations we will be investing in. So you can also build partnerships with organizations and communities and send us proposals. In this sense, that would be collective action on your side. So we're not really mandating actual partnerships. So now, if your question is more about the academic side, maybe that's what the question is. When I said that some of the circumstances when we will be funding academia is when they are really in partnership with community. So in that sense, it's really community leadership. You have a systemic issue. Communities are organized to try to respond to that, and they need to partner with academia for a specific thing that only academia can do, and that would be the partnership.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Winnipeg Boldness. If approved, how long before you receive funds? If you're partnered with a group that applies for funding, can you apply for funding for your own organization?
Yeah, I think we had that second question before. So I don't know if we want to respond what I said there. And so I can maybe repeat that. It's a question that is that you can ask in office hours. It's going to be more of a case by case question on whether what is the level of partnership in the initial grant where you are a partner? Are you a partner because you receive $5,000 compensation for something you're doing? Are you a partner because you receive half of the budget? Then if you receive half of the budget, then that's an existing grant. So we will be treating that as a potential renewal of grant, but we don't really do renewals when we have an existing grant. So this is why this is going to be more of a case-by-case question. And the other question was about, sorry,
That's
Lily.
a great question.
The other question was about,
oh no. One sec.
sorry, I don't remember what the first question was about, but don't hesitate to put it in the chat if
Yeah, please do. I cannot find that question again. I'm so sorry. On the topic of kind of funding things, just the question of how much can one apply for, kind of what are the the benchmarks of funding partnerships?
Right. So we tend to make larger grants. So we can make grants from maybe 100 or 150 a year to like 250 a year, but it really depends on the nature of the project, right? And so and we have a total budget that we're managing, so we can't also make a couple millions of dollars grants, because then that would be using all of our budget. So but we tend to be more of a larger grant maker in terms of disbursement.
Great. Good news. I found the question.
Great.
So if approved for funding, how long before you receive the funds?
All right. So at the end of the due diligence process, once you receive the announcement from us that you have been selected for a new partnership, you'll just receive the money in the next couple of days or weeks. It's not a very long process. It's really just an administrative process, so it shouldn't take that long.
Great. We have a question from Oasis. What does track record mean in this context? So project assessment is based on the success of an organization's previously funded projects, for example?
So it's a very good question. Thank you so much for this question. We're not really judging a current proposal based on the success of a past funded project from another funder. Although in our due diligence process, we may talk to a funder, but usually when we do that, it's not really to check how the grantee was. It's more to better understand the issues they work on and to better understand something else that we call positionality. And that's something we describe in our funding and partnership guide, where we're trying to understand really what is the positioning of an organization, in the ecosystem, how they contribute to addressing the issue that they're addressing, also understanding the challenges that they have. So track record, I would say it's more a matter of if you're saying we're gonna be fostering that systems change, have you already had success before? Or have you already had some kind of evidence of the fact that your model is working, right? And that's more but we don't have an actual way to assess that is prescriptive.
Great. We have a question from Michelle about geographic funding targets. For example, is there a cap on funding for a province, or are you looking to fund rural communities?
Very good question. Thank you so much, because we should have probably even mentioned rural communities in the equity denied communities that we're thinking about. And so what I would say is that yes, but the way you want to think about it is with that concept of additionality that we talked about. As we're building a portfolio, one of the considerations we have to think about as well is where we're showing up nationally, because we're a national funder. And if we want to keep maintaining that mandate, we have to be able to show up not just in the big centers like Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, but also in some of the small towns, and where there's also challenges there. So definitely that's part of some of the priorities that we have as well.
Great. We have a question. Can communities funding support building and sustaining the collective action needed for systems change where this work doesn't currently exist or is nascent? Such work can be time and resource intensive, which is challenging for smaller organizations.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Thank you so much. Yes, there's times when that's exactly what we're going to be funding. The building that capacity for collective action, or the early stages of that collective action. I would even say that so something maybe we should have clarified. We have two modes of the way we make our funding. We have the reactive mode and the proactive mode. So we respond to proposals that you send, but sometimes we would also seek out partnerships when we're trying to address particular issues. And so when it comes to seeking out partnerships in that proactive mode that we talk about, we've had the experience of starting collective action ourselves, where we played that convener role and we convened groups and we got them together and try to get them to work together as well. So that's definitely something, but it depends on the nature of the problem and depends on the nature of the community and our understandings of the complexity of collective action in these communities.
Great. Okay, those are all the questions that are in the Q&A. I'm just going to pause for 1 minute to see if anyone wants to throw out a last question. We have about 9 minutes left, so always good to end a little bit early, but I'll just pause.
I also want to give an opportunity to Frances or even yourself, Lily, if you wanted to do like provide some kind of clarifications on some of the things I said, you can also do so.
No, I jumped in where I could, but
Good.
you're doing great.
Thank you.
Francis?
No, I'm good. Just kind of been typing some answers too, so I think it kind of adds a little bit, or you added a little bit to some of the text responses too. So
Great. Okay. I am not seeing questions coming in, so I think we will leave it there and let everyone go. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Again, thanks to Agence for their incredible work helping us go through this process and really work through the strategy refinement. What you're seeing here is the effort of quite a long time. And thanks to the whole team as well. Thanks to our communications team for supporting with all of the setup and technology. Nalo?
Yeah, I also wanted to thank, just to make sure people know there's been a lot of people involved in that as well. So thank you to all the organizations that we've met with, all the people who participated in the process, and all the team members who were part of the communities team who now have their own something else happening. And so all of these people have been part of the choices we made. So really thank you all.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day, and we will send out the recording and the Q&A in the next little bit, along with a short survey. Thank you for your time.